Okay, we will start. Thank you very much for being here today. Here we are at the University of Guanajuato, la División de Ciencias Sociales y Humanidades Campus Guanajuato, a través de su Departamento de Lengua y la licenciatura en la enseñanza del inglés, nos ha invitado a participar en este mini taller que son parte de los eventos de desarrollo profesional para docentes. Okay, yes. So I was telling you, good morning, everyone. So welcome to this session with Dr. Amy Hodge. Just for the people who are online, here we have on the screen the ID and the code of access, just in case you want to share it with some of your classmates or colleagues or people who are interested in this session. I will introduce first to Dr. Amy Hodge. Amy Hodge is an assistant professor of English at the University of Texas at Arlington, specializing in technical writing and professional communication. Her research examines the language, writing, and communication strategies of multilingual engineers in transnational corporations, and she also researches what writing programs can do in order to create a more inclusive environment and prepare all writers for diverse workplaces. Her work has appeared in IEEE, Transactions and Professional Communication and Business and Professional Communication Quarterly, at the University of Texas at Arlington. Dr. Hodge teaches postgraduate and undergraduate courses in academic writing, technical editing, and professional communication. And today, Dr. Hodge will be presenting this mini workshop. Just again, just a reminder for you. Here you have the code just to register your attendance, in case that you need a certificate of attendance. Just another reminder, remember that we will have another session with Dr. Hodge tomorrow at 12:30, and you are also welcome to attend this one. So I will stop sharing the screen so that Dr. Hodge starts with the presentation. Please welcome Dr. Hodge.
Thank you so much for having me here today, both in person and on Zoom. I'm so thrilled to be here in Guanajuato and enjoying this beautiful city. I would especially like to thank my host, Dr. Graciela Arizmendi Gonzalez, for her kind hospitality and bringing me to this wonderful place. So today, this workshop is going to be about scholarly publishing and editing. And why I'm sharing this with you is that the world of scholarly publishing needs to hear from you. Is that we read a lot of articles, and I'll be quite honest, a lot of them are written by people in native English speaking contexts about people who are not native English speakers. Instead of having contexts where people are conversant in a language other than English and either trying to learn English or just trying to live their lives in that language. So my overview today, what we'll talk about is first, selecting a journal for publication. Sorry, go through that again. There we go. Creating a research space. This is missing something. Editing first. Yeah, keep clicking. There you go. There we go. Sorry. We're gonna start with research questions. I was like, where's the first thing on the list? There it is. We start with research questions, and we'll talk about selecting a journal for publication. We'll talk about creating a research space, and then editing for academic style. My goal for today is for you to come out with some new strategies and maybe even a kernel of an idea that you could start to build into a publication if you already haven't started doing research. Okay, now. Next slide.
Doesn't change. Okay.
There we go. So let's start then with your research questions, and I'll even share mine too. So online, if you'd like to share in the chat what your research question is, and this can be just a question that you want to have answered. It can be about your teaching context. It can be about things that you're reading. It can be about problems you face whenever you're trying to do your work. It can be things you just wonder a little bit about. So let's take a second and everybody come up with a research question. what question that you would like to have answered through research of some sort. I would love to share it for you to share it with me. Right? This can be a research that you're working on right now, or it can be something new that you haven't done yet.
Okay, this is one that I'm working on this semester for the next writing, and it's how do the different speaking activities affect oral performance in EFL learners?
Ooh, excellent. How do different speaking activities affect the performance of EFL learners? And is this at like the primary level? What level?
More like upper intermediate.
Upper intermediate. Okay, wonderful. All right. Anyone online? You make sure I can see the chat. I guess then maybe she wants me to read it. That's okay too. Okay, so Juliet says, how does the use of my L1 Spanish and my L2 English in the classroom impact the use of the L2 of my students? Excellent. I'm curious too about what level that is. I wonder sometimes if the different levels affect how well people take in different languages. So that's an excellent question. Beginners. Okay, perfect. So my current research question is something like this. What are technical writers' ethics about artificial intelligence? I want to know, like, is it ethical to use it in this way? Is it ethical to use it in this way? Is it not ethical to use it in some ways? I want to know what other people think. All right, so that's my current question. Is something like that. Chella, do you have a current research question that you're thinking about?
About the artificial intelligence?
No, but any research question you have.
Yeah, what would be the process or the things that the writers do when they are not writing at school? What they do in order to achieve what they achieve?
Excellent. Okay, so now I love that we have a out of school example too. So what do the writers do outside of school that helps them in some way with the writing that they do for school, right? And this is, you're doing postgraduates or graduates?
Yeah, graduates.
Graduates, okay. So again, we also have all levels, right? Of different kinds of people doing. Okay, excellent. So keeping that research question in mind. Next slide, sorry. I keep on wanting to like click the slide and can't do it. So I'm talking about here common frames for research problems. And just like you take a nice picture and you put it in a frame and it looks so much better if the frame is really nice, the same thing goes for a research question, right? So what we're doing is we're taking our core idea and we're putting a common frame around it, right? This helps readers, especially scholarly readers, because there's a lot of patterns in research. And so if we fit one of those patterns, it's often a little bit easier for people to assess what we've written. So let's go through some examples then. So the first kind of frame is a provocative exception, which means it's a new finding that contradicts an established, consistent, or accepted conclusion. So I have some examples here. So in classical physics, they have a lot of equations and explains gravity very well, right? The process of gravity. But then a new finding shows that there's fluctuations near black holes where we don't expect them to be. So now we need a new theory of quantum gravity to explain this new finding. All right, another example is it's generally accepted that native speakers are the best teachers of English, right? I go to a lot of places and they're advertising for English teachers and they'll say native speakers, right? A lot of people just assume that that's true. But one study finds that students are more willing to approach English teachers who are non-native speakers because they believe that the teachers will have more understanding of them. So that's an exception that makes us think, well, maybe the accepted thing is not entirely true. Okay, so this is a provocative exception. Right, go on to the next one. There's contradictory evidence is another framework. So there's two different sets of findings that are inconsistent at a larger, more abstract level. And so the researcher needs to contextualize each study to determine their alignment and differences. So one study finds that employees at a marketing firm learn more from a web-based seminar than an in-person workshop. But another finds that a web seminar is useless for training technicians at a desalination facility. So why does one group learn better online than the other?
think, Shelley, your example might be an excellent
Excellent
one
one of this, right? If we're looking at writing in school
and
writing outside of school,
right? Do those findings hold together at a more abstract level, or do we have to figure out, well, what are the differences between writing at home whenever we're trying to work on our writing and writing in our classroom? Okay, go for the next one. There's a knowledge void is another example. A study has not been conducted in your field before, or a method, a product, or process has not been used in your field before. So an example here is that lots of measurement tools determine cultural competency. But maybe no one has used this particular tool, this particular survey, to measure cultural competency in scientists at this university. Right, we know the bigger, broader, general assumption, but we don't know about the specific context, right? I think Khalid's example is a good one of this, right? We have a teacher speaking L1 Spanish, L2 English. How does that impact her students, right? She's limiting it to her classroom, right? So while we might know more generally about how teachers' language use impacts students, we don't know about Khalid's classroom. And so we need to find that out. There's a knowledge void that's there. Okay, next one. Action knowledge conflict. So people's behaviors differ from what they think they do. So according to a survey, 75% of people say that they wear a mask in public, but observations consistently show that 30 to 40% wear a mask in public. Why is this a difference? Why do we say one thing but do another? Right, is an action knowledge conflict. Next one. And then there's a methodological conflict as another framework. So the methods of previous studies have influenced the results and new methods need to be proposed. So this is a true story. Whenever they're figuring out systems, air con, and what temperature it should be set at, the original study that proposed an algorithm for figuring this out was based on a study of only one man. And it included calculations based upon the metabolic rate of one man. Right. This is why often whenever women go into places with air con, we're very cold. It's because our metabolic rate is different. But the scientists that set those thermostats only based it on one man. Right, and so they needed new methods, and they did a different study using both men and women to figure out what's a more suitable temperature for all people who might be in a room. Right, so the study there showed how the methods in the original study impacted the results, and so we need a new study to determine how that's true. And then a theoretical conflict. And so we're trying to figure out what theoretical model is best fit for the research topic. Do the available models account for the experimental data, or do we need to change that model in some way based upon new data? All right, so this is especially if we're gathering quantitative data, right? Is your study going to be quantitative or qualitative? Do you know yet? Qualitative, okay. So a quantitative study would say, let's look at this data. Does it fit what previous studies have said, right? And in some ways, the qualitative study might do something like that too, right? Are the findings about the performance of my student speaking, is that consistent with the performance of other students speaking in previous research, right? So there's class of theories. All right, so those are some examples of just how you take your problem and you frame it for someone else. So our next step is take that question now, excellent, right, this is the right slide, and turn it into a problem. So let's figure out first, what is the accepted knowledge about the problem? Now, some of this is done, like you read a bunch of papers and you find out what's not, but we don't have to do that today. Just, what do we think, people generally think. What do people generally think about the use of L1 and L2 in the classroom and its impact on students? What do people generally think about speaking performance? What do people generally think about writing done outside of school and its usefulness? So I want you to do 2 or 3 sentences. Is what's the accepted knowledge about that problem? Okay. So we'll start there and then we'll get into those other 2 elements in a second. So let's figure out what's accepted. Right, common knowledge maybe. is a good way to frame it about our problem.
So what do we have to write?
That first part, accepted knowledge about the question you had, right? So for you, what do most people think about speaking activities and how successful they are? So like in my example, for artificial intelligence, I think a lot of people think that, well, maybe it's very divisive. Some people think AI is very ethical, right? We should all be using it. And some people think, no, we should never be using it, right? There's not a lot of in between. Maybe that would be my statement. But accepted knowledge about the problem. People generally think this thing. No, Hulid, we cannot hear you. Do you mind typing in the chat? I'm not sure how to.
We cannot hear you, Yuli. Probably your microphone is off.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
No, we can hear
No?
you.
Yeah.
Okay, try again. Yeah, she's unmuted now.
Now, can you hear me?
Could you try again, Julie?
No.
Okay, this is like it was at the beginning where she's speaking, but we can't hear her. No.
Are you wearing headphones? Sometimes it has happened to me that I use headphones and I don't know what happened exactly on the computer, and it can be heard my voice. So probably without headphones. Or you can write your question or your sentences on the chat, and Amy can read them, or I
Okay.
can read them as well for her. Okay, she says she will enter again.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, and let me know whenever you finished with your accepted knowledge. You ready?
Yeah.
What, you go for it.
Speaking activities have an elevated affective filter on students.
Okay. Elevator. Excellent. So we generally believe essentially that they work
Mhm.
pretty well. Okay.
My turn?
Yes, your turn.
Students write in English, but they are thinking in Spanish many times.
Mhm. Okay. How's that connected? Just can you add a little bit to the end to connect it to your original question about outside of school writing?
I need to write something that is connected to that.
Yeah, just because I think what you're saying is that the general belief is that students write in English but think in Spanish, especially outside of school or inside of school, or is it just that's general both places?
Yeah, in general in both places. Yes.
That makes sense. But what we can also think about the next set of here, which is the troublesome or the problematic part here, which is if that thing was true, why would we bother doing research on it? Right? Like we would just say, okay, done, no problem. But there's probably something within that statement you just made that says, it's back to your question a little bit again. Well, why do we need to know more about this accepted knowledge, right? All the examples I gave you, there was something that was a little bit off about the accepted knowledge, and that's how we developed the research. All right, so in my example of generative artificial intelligence, and some people say it's good, and some people say it's bad, and there's no in between. We don't know a lot about why people make those judgments. All right, why do some people think it's so good? Why do some people think it's not so good? Right.
Could it be, for instance, in the case of writers, and based on the sentence that I said, that they use the L1 to write into the L2 because sometimes they do not have the complete knowledge on how to write in the L2. But now they use, for instance, when they are out of the school, they are using probably artificial intelligence to compensate a little bit what they don't know in the L2 in terms of writing a paper, and that is how they might achieve the text.
Okay, so are you saying then that this idea about we think in L1, write L2, but artificial intelligence changes that cycle, is that right?
Well, they might use the artificial intelligence like to compensate some gaps that they might have in the L1 when they are writing in the L2.
Okay. So then I think how is it a problem, right? Is it we don't know what those tools are that they use?
The problem, well, I'm not completely sure whether it is a problem or not,
Mm.
because maybe for some of them it's useful what they do and they can achieve what they do in the way that they do that. But it could be that when they are using the artificial intelligence, they are not completely developing their mental processes in order to be a better writer, for instance.
So we're not sure about the impact of artificial intelligence on these processes.
Yes, because I think that they are like jumping or bridging one process that they can be done immediately with artificial intelligence rather than processing all these that might take more time for them.
Okay. Yeah, so we're unsure about the impact. And so we don't know that thing.
Right.
And so we need to figure it out. Right.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Did you have an idea of what was the troublesome or problematic part?
The problem is, because the affected filter is high, the students are reluctant to participate in class.
Okay.
There is like the motivation, anxiety, and confidence in students. So if it is high, the students are like anxious and like self-aware, and if it is low, they feel more comfortable.
Okay, excellent. So these speaking activities we know they're useful, but students may be hesitant to join in and do them because they fear being like messing up in some way. Okay.
We have
Excellent.
something in the chat.
Oh, good. I think this may be Julia.
Fernando Perez.
Oh,
Do you want to
Fernando.
read it or I'll read it for you?
Sure, I'll go ahead and read it for us. All right. Hi, Fernando. So students try to find a balance between the use of the L1 and the L2 in the classroom to write in a proper way, even if they do not know at all the language. And because of that, the use of different tools, AI, to solve doubts about how to write better the L2, making the process something more bearable. Okay, so tell us a little bit then, and maybe, oh, wait, you got more here. Hi. How is that a problem? Right? Are you saying then that, like, because it seems like you're framing it as AI is very helpful to students, right? So what's troublesome? Why are we worried or concerned about that? Is it like Chella was saying, maybe they're missing some important developmental stage? Because we do write some research about, here's a teaching thing I did that worked really well. Yay, right? Like that's heavy research. But I think that to take our research up in sophistication, we're solving a problem not just for us in our classroom. We start to solve problems for other people in other classrooms, right? So it sounds like you've got some kernel of that idea, Fernando, about this tool works for students, right? But how do we help someone else solve a problem with this tool? In long-term, okay, students could depend a lot on the use of AI. Excellent. I think that is a very troublesome or problematic part, right? That we worry about dependence on these tools for students. Could they be able to someday carry on a conversation, do work without the AI? Okay, excellent. So we've got first part, the accepted knowledge, what people generally believe. Now we're getting the troublesome or the problematic part. And then the final part of what this is called a problem statement is, what are the actions taken or the data set gathered to solve the problem? Right. So what your actions taking? So in a lot of the teaching ones you're given, what are we teaching? What does that lesson look like? And then what is the data set that we need? Right? What data do you need to know from? So students speaking, I guess we probably need to know their scores on the activity. Right? Is there other data that we might need in order to solve this problem?
Well, I was thinking of the action being to implement relevant topics to motivate students, lowering the affected filter. Okay.
How are we going to measure that effective filter for them?
Through interviews.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so another part of your data set then is interviews, where we figure out exactly what they think about speaking
speaking
in
in
class.
class and doing these kinds of activities.
For
For
my
my
example,
example, the study I'm starting to work on now about artificial intelligence, we're making a survey, and the survey is going to have scenarios. It's going to say something like, you are this person and you use AI in this way. And the person has to put, is it very ethical, somewhat ethical, neutral, right? Not ethical and very unethical. And then they have to explain their answer below. And that's going to be our data set to determine what people's ethics are about AI. All right, other people, anyone online, what data set or actions are you taking to try and solve this problem?
Okay, I'll share mine. I was thinking about the influence or the use of the L1 in writing in the L2. Possibly I could use, for instance, a writing that is written in the L1, in Spanish in this case, and a writing that is written in the L2, in English in this case as well, and identify possible words that are used like similar or probably possible similar structure in the way that they express what they write in one and the other language, and also asking them directly what they do when they are writing those tests.
Yes, I think that interview said, like, if you're thinking about processes in writers' minds, interviewing is one of the best ways to get that information from them.
Yes.
All right. All right, Khalid says, action taken. Use L1 only in a situation that can be difficult for students, such as instructions. Excellent. So what kind of data might you gather, right, to help you determine is that action effective or not, or what's the impact of it on your students? And I was thinking about this too. Are you going to gather data from your students in L1 or in L2?
Can you hear Juliet?
I think she's typing in. I think we can't hear her, but give her a second to process. So I think it could be an interesting, for her issue. Sorry, is you could look at, you could do a kind of questionnaire about perceptions of the L2. Even some research is also observation. I think if I was teaching and I'm teaching in, let's say, you could say yes, since we're more comfortable, then feel free to ask something, to repeat something, but in L1, yeah, because I think some of that might be observation, right? Whenever you say something in the L2 and students are like, right, you would get some information already about how well they're responding. Probably some test scores too might be helpful for that. You know, are the test scores different whenever you use this method versus whenever you use a different method? Or even some interviews with students. How comfortable do they feel whenever in class I'm using this, using L1 or using L2? So there's a lot of really great options for you here. But if you have these three pieces, right, we start to have the core of a scholarly idea. And I loved those of you who were able to make the writing an objective statement workshop yesterday. This is the steps before now you do the objective statement, which is right, the aim of the study is. And if you're online and watching this later, like go back, find that recording, pause this one, go back, find that recording, watch that one. And then we'll come back to this one.
Okay, yeah.
All right, go ahead to the next slide. So the next question is, how do I select a journal for my manuscript? And I include this at the very early stage of thinking about a publication, even if I know many of you are doing this for a thesis. So that's one step. But it's also helpful to think about, well, could I share this with other people after my thesis? And it's early on in the stage because the journal you select shapes how you write the research. All right, so I'll give a quick example. So some of my research in technical writing is meant for other educators, right? So other people who are teaching. And so whenever I write that research, I talk about classroom choices, I talk about assessments I use, I talk about assignments and activities. But some of my research is asking, people who write outside of university, right? People who write in industries and businesses. They don't care about the classroom practices I use, right? They care about the impact of those practices.
I have a question about what you just said. So then when we write, is it like better to consider which is the journal where we will be publishing so that we start writing based on the specific journal?
Yes.
Okay.
That's to start shaping it, not in terms of, I mean, if you're writing a thesis, write the thesis for your professors, right? But
Yeah.
also have in the back of your mind, you can start to shape it for a journal, right? So that it's easier for you to translate. And I think that your professors honestly would love for you to publish it in a journal, right? That's their goal whenever they have you in these programs, is for you to share what you know with other people.
Yeah, but now that you said that, is like the same. So if they are writing for publication and they consider first the journal, the same would apply for writing a thesis. If we have, for instance, a template for a thesis, they can be guided by the thesis and what are the elements that they need to write in each of those.
Absolutely, yes. Because the journal will often have common forms of writing, the IMRAD format, you know, right? Introduction, methods, results, discussion. And that's similar to your thesis, right? They're often not very different, but it's something good for you to talk about with your advisors, right? If you express to them, I would like to turn this into a publication, often I find that they're very willing to help you with that transition. So how do you pick one? So let's go to the next slide. I've got some options here for you. So these are some websites for you to go to. Often they'll ask you to put in things like keywords. So that problem statement that you just wrote, the accepted knowledge, the troublesome or problematic part, and the actions taken, that's almost an abstract. So just put it in there as the keywords, and it will often tell you what kinds of journals talk about the things that you want to talk about, right? Go to the next one. There's another couple guides. Journalfinder.elsevier.com and then journalsuggester.springer.com. The last two are run by a large company that has a lot of different journals, so it will point you towards its own journals, which is fine. Go on to the next slide. The other thing the other one I find that is actually very helpful is I go and I find my professor's CVs online and I look at where did they publish their work. Right. Often my work is very similar to some of theirs, especially if there's, if you're working closely with a professor, ask them, what journal do you suggest for the kind of work that I'm doing? Other things that whenever you find a journal on one of those sites or you talk to one of your professors, you're going to want to look for these things on the journal's website. Do a little research into the journal. First is impact factor. And what that just means is how many people across the world cite a particular journal. Now, a higher impact factor means more people. Lower impact factor means less people. Sometimes less people is good, sometimes more people is good. Right? So more people is often good if you want to have a lot of people cite your work and see a lot of what you do. Sometimes lower impact factor is good, especially if you're just starting out on your research journey. Fewer people often means there's less competition. So if you submit something, it might be more likely to be accepted by that journal, right? And so then you can kind of climb up in scope as you go throughout your career. The second thing is aims and scope. Almost every journal will have something like this on their homepage. And what it says is, like we talked about objective statements at the previous workshop. Aims is the objective statement for the journal. What are they trying to do with their journal? And you need to see if your aim aligns with their. It also often talks about scope, meaning the types of research problems that they seek to solve. And so you can see, does your research problem fit those same keywords as the journal? And then often they'll talk a little bit about audience. And this is what I was giving my example about, is the difference is an audience of classroom teachers or an audience of practitioners outside of education or whoever it is, right? Maybe it's educators in a particular area and not all educators,
or maybe it's a different group, right? So looking at who their audience is can be very helpful. They should all have a guide for authors in some way that says, often that this helps with things like, what type of citation style should I use? What is the typical format of a journal article in the paper? Often journals also have different types of articles. So they might have a research-driven, empirical study kind of article. They might have what are called like commentaries, where it's more opinion pieces. And often I love journals that also have teaching articles, where it's like, it's the, like kind of like where Fernando phrased his first one, like, I have a cool tool that I use in my classroom, right? That would be a good outlet for that kind of article. All right. They also all have editorial boards, so you can look at the people on there and see if you recognize any names, any famous people. That's kind of nice. Editorial boards also, there's always a person in charge of a journal, right? The editor or editorial board, editor-in-chief, something like that. If you read the journal's information and you're still not sure whether or not your research fits in that journal, you can always write to them and ask them. I've done a lot of these letters, right? And I can give, if anyone wants to contact me, I can give a template. But you say, dear editor, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm working on this project. I wonder, do you think this fits into the scope of your journal? And let them tell you, because sometimes it's hard to figure out. And then the final thing to look for as a factor is publication fees. Some art journals will ask you to pay a fee to publish, and you have to decide for yourself if that is helpful or not, right? If that is going to be worth it. So things to keep in mind. Next step is, how can I improve my chances of getting accepted? And I'm going to tell you about a way, again, just like the picture frame, right? Framing it in common ways that readers understand. The next strategy I'm going to give you is a way that helps readers place your work in context with other work. Let's go on to the next. It's called creating a research base. Maybe they've heard about this strategy. You guys teach that yet?
Yes.
Good.
Well, have you heard about creating a research space?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
It's
well,
about like the CARS model.
Yes.
Okay.
John Swales?
Yes.
So this is I teach a class to graduate students at my university, working on publishing articles, and I always tell them, this is the secret. Nobody ever tells you this is how academic articles get written, but that's how they do. Right, so secret, but let everybody else know this is how it works. Go ahead. So almost all research introductions, right, at the very beginning of your paper, are made up by 3 different moves. The first move is to establish a research territory. So you tell the reader about recent issues, trends, or questions in the literature. And often you're going to provide individual examples to support this claim. So you're going to pull from different papers to say, here's what people are talking about in this field. Or often you'll tell, another way to say it is that you tell the reader about agreements between different studies on a particular topic. All right, so these studies agree on this thing, and you provide individual examples to support this claim.
I have a question about this established research territory. This is like the context, right? Or is it different?
It's context, but in a different way. Like, so let me give you an example to differentiate what I mean here. So the context of my classroom is which students are in it, what am I teaching, what level are they, what my students' experience with this subject is, right? That's a context. The context here is, what have other people in scholarship been talking about regarding my topic? Right, so this is a hard one, because as teachers, we're very focused on what's the problem in my classroom, how can I solve it? But this takes that problem and says, wait a second.
Okay.
What have people who have written about this said about this problem? There's a famous metaphor here by the rhetorician, his name is Kenneth Burke, and I'll give it to you right now. He talks about he talks actually about as rowing, but this is my metaphor of a party. Okay, so let's say, I don't know, let's say it's Friday night, right? And you want to go to a party. The party starts at 7 p.m. And you're like, okay, great, I'm going to go to this party. But you know, you go out to dinner with friends, it's a little while. And so by the time you get to the party, maybe it's like 8 o'clock, the party's already going and everybody's having a good time. Right. And so you go into the party and you say, hi, how are you? How are you? How are you? And you find a group of your friends engaged in a really strong debate about something. And so you listen for a second to see what they're talking about. And then you kind of jump in, you say, no, well, I agree with this person over here, but no, I think you're wrong too. Or, you know, here's what I think about this issue, right? And you have a nice debate, and then it's getting kind of late and you're really tired. So you're like, okay, I'm going to go home. And so you say, you know, thanks for the conversation. I had a great time. The party's still going on, but you head out the door, wave goodbye to people. This is how we engage with scholarship, right? So people have been writing about our topic for a long time. Right? They're nice people, most of them, right? And so we kind of sit and we listen a bit to what scholars are saying about our work, and then we jump in, we say, here's what I think. I agree with this guy, I disagree with this guy, you're sort of right, but what about this idea? And then we leave, and more people are going to take up our research later on, right? So this first move is the listening stage, where you're like, okay, I think we're having a heated debate about this, right? And you can kind of summarize, you know, this person over here thinks this, and this person over here thinks this.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, and very, very clear example or analogy, I could say, because yeah, it makes me digest very well the information. But I have another question, maybe it's possible to have. So when we write and we say in the subtitle, like background, is also like established research territory, or it's something different? Because sometimes there are some kind of confusion in those titles or subtitles in a work.
Yes.
What can you tell us?
So most likely, because here again, I'm making a difference between the problem in my classroom and the party, right? Okay. So like the people at the party are talking about the issue that's in my classroom, but they haven't been to my classroom.
Okay.
Right. So the background and context are about my classroom that I have been in and I know about. Right. But the party is where we share and we talk about the problem. Okay. Right. But the context is a classroom over here, not the party. Okay. Right. They're connected by a common topic, but they're different places.
And coming back to the context that you explained before, that was the study where it takes place and all that. So it's like similar to the context that you just explained now.
Yeah. So like background of the study might be, well, I was in my classroom one day and I noticed that when I talk in L1, and my students jump in and try to keep me in L1 instead of L2. Okay. Right. And so I noticed that. And then I went over to the party and I saw that all these other people were talking about having a similar problem in their own classrooms. Okay. Right. So I took that information. I went back over to my classroom and said, I want to try something.
So the second one would be like, this is an issue that I have experienced, blah, blah, and these authors have experienced like the same struggle.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. But they haven't experienced quite my struggle, right? Because they don't work with my students in my context where they come from. Right. Okay. Exactly. Excellent.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good questions. Let me also show you some examples. Right. And these are from my own writing, not all of them. I'm going to show you some that are not my own writing and you'll see why. So this is the very first sentence of my introduction and a piece that I wrote. So the example here is, over the past 2 decades, an approach to writing across the curriculum that focuses on the academic department as the nexus of activity has gradually become established and is spreading across U.S. colleges and universities. Right, so it's saying over the past 2 decades, this is a current trend that has been happening. Right, of establishing the research territory. Okay, go to the next example. This is another one. This one actually comes at the beginning of my literature review. in a different article. I have an introduction, and then I have a literature review. So it also may appear in there. I don't know if some of you may be assigned the right literature reviews, and this is a similar structure that works well. So you can see this one says, the transition from the university to the workplace is difficult for many students, but engineering students face specific challenges regarding their technical writing skills. It's saying this is generally agreed upon. Writing is hard, and it's even harder for engineers. Right? Everybody thinks this. Okay, go on to the next example. Let's see if you can spot this now. Can you read that? Okay, you can read that in person. Zoom, I hope it's big enough for you on your screen. All right. Well, I'll read out this paragraph and see if you can spot where move one happens. Wind power generation has been an alternative energy source with a large penetration and power system due to its environmental friendliness and economic values. In the United States, wind power generation has reached a 5.55% of all generated electrical energy for calendar year 2016. In Texas, it ranks #1 in the US for wind power capacity, which provides 15.1% of the energy use in 2016. This large-scale wind power generation systems have begun to have a significant influence on the power system. Unlike the conventional power plants, large-scale wind farm constitutes hundreds and or thousands of wind turbines, which makes it impractical to develop each individual wind turbine for stability analysis. Therefore, it is critical to establish the reasonable dynamic equivalent model for wind farm, which could provide the foundation for wind power related studies, such as control algorithm design, system stability analysis with large-scale wind power connected with grid, and power system planning and protection. Okay, so I gave you, this is a really technical paper, so if you don't understand everything, don't worry, I don't understand it either. The idea is if you can find it in these really technical papers, you can find it anywhere, right? So where do you think there's a move one where we've established research territory, where we have a general statement about something that everybody in the field agrees upon, right? Or it's a consensus. So people in the chat, if you want to like put like sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, whatever you think.
And here in the audience,
The second sentence, in the United States, wind power generation has reached to, and let's say like, is that the research territory?
It's close.
is there another one? Someone online that would like to add something, or I share mine?
You're almost there.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Well, I think that is where it says this large scale wind until before therefore.
Okay, this large wind power generation systems have begun to have a significant influence on the power system. Yes, that's one of them, right? Because it says, hey, these things have a big influence. It seems like everybody agrees upon that. What about sentence number 1? I think this is actually closer to yours, right? Because what you had is an example of that general statement, right? So that first sentence says, wind power generation has been an alternative energy source with a large penetration in the power system. And then your second sentence says, in the United States, here's that penetration, it's 5.55%, which is apparently big, right? We don't need to know the details, right? But the general statement is in that first sentence, and then the second statement gives an example of that, right? So there's several places where this occurs, which is fine. Okay, right, so that first sentence does it, and then fourth sentence, right, this large scale wind power generation system, that sentence also does it. I like the first sentence as an example because it has a bunch of citations at the end. Sometimes that's an extra clue. Whenever you say, here's something that somebody says, and it's like 5 different citations afterwards, and that shows you like, hey, everybody agrees upon this, right? Excellent.
So the move on would be creating a topic sentence.
It's close to a topic sentence, right? Because as you saw the example, right? But it's not necessarily the topic sentence for the whole paragraph. All right, I'll show you the other moves in a second, move 2 and move 3. And they don't always appear within one paragraph. So I don't want to lead you astray. Okay.
I have a question about this one. Sometimes it's a little difficult for some of us to identify what is the literature review and some of our opinions or ideas, because sometimes we think that we have to write our ideas, but these are the ideas that you are sharing are from different scholars, which we can know that because of you have the square brackets. But in the end, they are our ideas as well.
They
as
are
from
our
others.
understanding of the research, yes.
Yes, but how we can make it clearer for some students who, when this is not completely clear, because some of the students sometimes they say, I have been told that I have to write my voice or project my voice or write my ideas, but they write things without, for instance, a citation, and they say, these are my ideas. This is what I was told to write my ideas. But these are your ideas in this case, but you read those ideas from someone else. How we can make is this like not very clear boundary between what is yours and what is theirs?
So one thing I would say is, how original are any of us, right? Like, I think even the things I think in research now are probably not that new, but it's all, to me, it's all about framing the difference between what they say and what I say. It's sort of like, so my grandmother is an amazing gardener, right? So she's passed away now, but whenever she was alive, she could take a plant that was like one little tiny leaf and she could grow it into a big plant. Just, I don't know how she did it. It was magic, right? But now whenever you visit my house and you see all these plants, I have lots of them too. I'm not as good as her, but whenever people say, oh, you're such, I say, it's my grandmother. It's her spirit, right? I give her credit for the thing that I now know. So that, to me, that would be the difference, is I learned these things reading this scholarship, and I use citations, and I use the signal phrases, like you're talking about, this person says this, to give respect to those people, right? And it is hard to untangle. That's why I'll show you in a second. There's a move where you do share your own ideas. And so it's also telling students, this place, yes, this place, no.
Okay.
And saying, and why this model starts out is because most research papers start out with, here's what other people say.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
So move 2 is where we establish a niche, right? And do you know what a niche is? Not quite. A niche,
Like a gap?
like a gap, or actually what it means is, in my classroom I have an example of this. Okay, so actually, does anybody have a cat? You have a cat, okay. Where does your cat sleep?
Wherever he wants.
Wherever he wants, okay. Do you have, like, you know those little the cat trees? No, you don't have one of these? Have you seen these? Like, it's a little cat tree, and then there's like a box, and there's a hole cut out in it, and the cat can go inside.
Yes.
That's a niche, is the inside there, right? So it's a space where you can fit in.
Okay.
Right? So like the niche is not a niche if you had a very big dog, right? Because they can't fit in. A dog needs a different niche.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's about fitting into that space. Okay, it's making sense. So there's a space where something can go into it. And it's very specific to the space that you have. Right? So picture a cat going into a box. Cats love boxes, don't they? So much. Right? So this is what you're establishing with your scholarship. Is you're saying there's a space here for more conversation. Okay? So you might do several different things. One thing you might do is tell the reader why previous studies might be flawed. So this is an example of the air conditioning one I was telling you about, where they based it all upon the data from one man. It also might be something like, we know a lot about speaking activities in
classrooms that are not in Guanajuato, Mexico, right? So we cannot claim to know everything if we do not have, Spanish L2 English speakers in this broader conversation, right? Or we might tell the reader, well, we still don't know. This is the gap you were talking about, right? There's something we still don't understand. I think where was, let's see, I think there was, it's a little bit about Fernando's example of like, we don't know the long-term effects of AI, right? So that's a gap, right? Or we tell the reader about implications from previous studies that have not been addressed yet. So if you read somebody else's research paper, often at the end they have something like future research. And you're like, oh, that's similar to my idea. That's what you're picking up on, right? Is we did a study, it taught us some things, but it didn't teach us some other things yet, right? This may be Khalid's example of the use of L1 and L2 in the classroom, right? Somebody might have ended a previous article by saying, well, I used a lot of L1 in my classroom, so maybe these findings only apply to this context. And Khalid can pick up and say, well, I took that study and I used L1 only in these specific places, and now we know more, right? All right, come on in. Or we just tell the reader why we need to keep researching this topic, right? We give some examples of it, because the gap is actually not as common as we think it is. I think especially in teaching research, because there's a lot of us teachers, we've tried a lot of things, haven't we? Right, so we know a lot, but we need to explain why we need to continue researching this particular topic. Let me show you some examples of that. So this is from another article I wrote, same article as one of the first ones I shared. But you can see here there's a sentence that reads this way. However, if you have given attention to how the best efforts can be unknowingly harmful to some multilingual and transnational students. Right, so we know something, but few have really paid attention to this concept. Right, that's my move to. Okay, show you another example. This one is about project-based learning. And at the end of the introduction paragraph, I say, however, the overall effectiveness of project-based learning and experiential learning in general may vary widely based upon the nature and structure of the teamwork. Right, so we know project-based learning is good, but there's a lot of different types of project-based learning, and how effective each individual one may be is hard to figure out. Then the next part of this goes to, I think this is actually back to our discussion earlier about context. At the time of this study, our institution began a renewed emphasis on project-based learning, and we wanted to know more about the potential impacts of the culture of the region on teamwork and projects, given the diverse student body mentioned above. So that's an example where the classroom context, my institution said, let's do more project-based learning. I said, okay, but I'm also going to do research about it. That's what we're doing it, right? Where the context is starting to impact the conversation, right? But the move to the establishing a niche is that we don't know how well project-based learning actually works in a lot of contexts. Okay, let's see if we spot it in this one. All right, I'm going to read these sentences to you, and you're going to look for where is move to, where is a niche being established, right? So a gap, a flaw in previous studies, something we don't know, or a reason to continue doing the research. Highways, power grids, communication networks, and water pipe systems are all crucial infrastructure systems for modern cities and societies. In spite of their importance, the condition of these infrastructure networks in the United States is inadequate. The infrastructure system of the United States received a C- score from the American Society of Civil Engineers, which corroborates this statement. Therefore, research into infrastructure repair and restoration is extremely important. All right, so in the chat, if you want to drop in sentence 1, 2, 3, or 4, I'll let people here process a little bit which sentence you're going to vote on, having moved to establishing a niche.
Yes.
right? And I told everybody this earlier. If you don't understand all the terms in this, don't worry. I don't understand them all either. The idea is to do something that's harder and more specialized so that you can see it easily in your own work. Okay. So what about sentence one? Highways, power grids, communication networks, and water pipe systems are all crucial infrastructure systems for modern cities and societies. Who thinks that one establishes a niche?
Someone on the audience? Do you think that the first sentence is the one that establishes the niche?
Congratulations, you all passed your first quiz question. Good. You know what that one is? The first sentence?
Like the research territory.
Yes, research territory. This is move one we talked about before you guys got in here, which just says, here's the general knowledge that we in this field understand to be true, right? These things are crucial infrastructure systems for modern cities and societies. Great. How about sentence two? In spite of their importance, the condition of these infrastructure networks in the United States is inadequate. Do you think that one establishes a niche? Okay, we got a few. Oh, we do have peer pressure? Excellent. Why does it establish a niche? Exactly. It says it's inadequate, right? So we know that this thing is true, that these are important, but current infrastructure in the US is inadequate. And the next sentence is give examples of that, right? It says, oh, we got a C- on our test score from the engineers. Right? Who said this?
And also because it says at the beginning of the sentence, in spite of their importance, that is a key phrase that can help us to identify something.
Yes. Let me go back to where I have the list of what move to could look like. Back. Yeah, this one. Oh, yeah, this one. Right. So it's telling the reader why we need to keep researching this topic. Because in spite of its importance, and all the scholarship knows that, we're still failing, or we're C-. It's not quite failing. We're just barely passing, right? Excellent. Okay, move forward.
Here, the next.
Well, one more for you. Extra quiz question. This one, I want you to look for the niche, establishing a niche, why we need to keep doing this research, what the gap is. So in recent times, deep neural networks have demonstrated excellent performance in several computer vision domains, such as image classification, object detection, and segmentation, etc., with the availability of large data sets, such as ImageNet. However, this requirement of a significant amount of labeled training data is a major drawback in training deep neural networks, as there's much noise in these data sets. There mainly exists two kinds of noise. One, feature noise, and two, label noise. Both types of noise have adverse effects on the performance of the network. However, the label noise is shown to have much more significant impact on the performance of deep neural networks than feature noise. Thus, removing or reducing the consequences of label noise is of great importance. All right, so figuring out which sentence we think has move to in it. And if you're scared of deep neural networks and you don't know what they are, that's okay. No worries. All right, what do we think about sentence one? In the recent times, deep neural networks have demonstrated excellent performance in several computer vision domains, such as image classification, object detection, and segmentation, etc., with the availability of large data sets, such as ImageNet. Is that one move to? Establishing a niche? You guys are just doing so good on your quiz here. Excellent. Right? What about that one? Is that one move one?
Yes.
Close to context, but what the research agrees upon. Right, so previous scholars say these deep neural networks are awesome at these things. Right. The clue I think you're picking up on is all the citations in that sentence, where it's like, look, all these scholars are saying, yes, this is totally right. Okay, what about sentence two? However, this requirement of significant amount of labeled training data is a major drawback
in training deep neural networks, as there's much noise in these data sets. Does that move 2, establishing a niche? Not quite a consensus. Is anybody who wants to raise their hand for I still don't know? Okay, fair enough. All right, people who picked this sentence as having a niche in it. Why did you think that?
Because it says it's a major drawback in training deep and neural networks.
Yeah, so there's a couple of key phrases in there. The however, right, against that previous sentence. There's a major drawback in a requirement, right, and that tells us there's a problem. Excellent. A flaw in the previous studies, right? So that one does have a niche in it. All right. Now, did anybody else say, wait a second, doctor, I think there's a move to elsewhere in the paragraph? Oh, this one is a tricky writer. It's got 2 of them in here, right? There's another one. Because it first tells us there's 2 kinds of noise. It says, however, the label noise is shown to have much more significant impact on the performance of these deep neural networks than feature noise. Right. So it is signaling, a difference in the 2 different types of noises. That last sentence also has a move 2 in it. Thus, removing or reducing the consequences of label noise is of great importance. It's signaling to us why we need to keep doing that research. All right. Making sense so far? So this one, if you spotted the first one, that's great. You get an A+. Okay. You didn't have to spot the second one.
Maybe it's where it says there mainly exist 2 kinds of noise, like is just limiting to 2 types or 2 kinds of noise, and then it says that removing or reducing the consequence of label noise is of great importance.
Yeah, so there mainly exists that sentence where it's talking about 2 different types of noise. That's just reporting information from the scholarship. But where it says, here's why we need to keep studying those 2 types of noises, that's where move 2 comes in. Right? Because move to the next slide. What we're going to do is we're going to occupy that niche. We talked about niches in terms of cats getting in boxes, right? Like it's something that you have to fill, or a cat has to fill, right? Because you may not want to crawl into a box yourself. That's a bit much. But it is a space that something can occupy. And so move 3 is where you occupy it. And this is where I think you were asking, like, where students say, okay, I give my ideas now. And yes, this is the place where you enter in the conversation. So you say, you're going to outline how your research will either address that flaw, you'll say how you're going to fill that gap, how you're going to consider those implications of previous research. If someone else has said, hey, here's an implication of my research, and you say, okay, I'm going to do it, pick up from that previous scholar, or you're going to continue the tradition of researching this topic, right? You've given some reason why we need to keep looking into this issue, and we're going to do it, right? So let's see some more examples. So this one, right, remember move 2, showed you this one. However, if you have given attention to how this thing can cause harm, move 3, go ahead, go ahead.
The next?
Yes, the next. Move 3, I map the consequences. Right, so if you have seen how this thing could be harmful, I'm saying, here's the consequences. And I write about, they're kind of harmful. Right? If you've done this, I'm going to do it. Go me. Right? So next example. Oh, this is a good one. So silica. Doesn't this look interesting? No, it doesn't. But we're going to look through here. We're going to look for move 3. Right? Where someone is announcing the point of their study. Right? And they're filling that gap that they've previously talked about. So I'm going to read this and I'm going to mess up a lot of words. So no judgment, okay? The versatility of silica can be seen in the fabrication of diverse industrial components, including biomedical, catalytic, cosmetic, and pharmaceutical applications. In addition to its use in separation media, detergents, and coatings. Many approaches, including chemical, biological, and hybrid processes, enable the production of a variety of silica structures. Among the chemical processes, Stober's method has been widely used in multiple industries. However, biological and hybrid processes are becoming more meaningful for sustainable development. In the existing literature, filamentous bacteriophages have been utilized in the fabrication of silica structures. In such approaches, phages are coated with inorganic compounds such as tetramethylorthosilicate, maybe, and TeOS, among other silica precursors. These hybrid phage silica structures have been applied in areas of catalysis and electronics, where they serve as functional nanoparticles with the capability of self-assembly. In our hybrid strategy of silica structure fabrication, we utilize the silafin R5 peptide sequence from Cylindrotheca fusiformis. Just saying words, it's fine. Let's stop there, because I think everybody's probably pretty lost, right? Can you spot move 3? Okay, in our hybrid strategy of silica structure fabrication. Excellent. What clued you in? Was it the amazing amount of knowledge you have about silica? Exactly, right? We moved, because remember, move 1, establishing research territory. We talked about what other people had written about. Move 2, establishing the niche. We talked about the gaps or the flaws of previous studies, and now it's our turn. Even in the sciences, we'll often use first person or here plural first person to talk about what this study has done. This is the same as the objective statement that if you did the workshop yesterday, right? A very similar concept. Here's what we set out to do. Same process for move 3, establishing what we did. Yeah? All good so far? Okay. Go on to the next one. So as a wrap up, 1, establishing the research territory. You're going to tell the reader about recent issues, trends, or questions in the literature, or you're going to tell the reader about agreements between different studies on a particular topic. Move 2, you're going to tell the reader why previous studies might be flawed, or what we don't know, that what is the research gap, or we'll tell about implication from future previous studies that have not been yet addressed, or we'll just say, here's why we need to keep researching this thing. Next slide. And then we say, here's what we're going to do about it. Now, for those of you who some of you missed out on this at the beginning, we did a kind of study of, we made a problem statement of our own that was what people agreed upon, what was troublesome or problematic about that, and the actions taken in data set. It's the same thing. So you now have a CARS research introduction, creating a research-based introduction. If you do this, you're going to be understandable to a lot of different researchers, because this is the common pattern that they use across fields. Right, so yay, you got something now. There's a research you're working on. Okay, I'll stop here. I think is my next slide. Yes, okay. Because we're actually we have 7 minutes left. So actually, I think I'll stop and I'll take any questions. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you very much,
Yes.
Dr.
You can skip to
Amy.
my very last slide. I have a picture for you.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing the slides.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, because I want to make sure that there's time for people to ask questions. Even if I covered it early in the workshop, don't worry, ask it anyway. I'm happy to answer it, okay?
Okay, thank you very much for this presentation. It was very clear for many of us, especially some concepts that sometimes are not very clear for some of us as well, such as identifying the context or what is the literature or where we can implement our own ideas and the author's ideas. Okay, so thank you very much. So I would like to ask here the audience whether you have a question or a comment for Dr. Amy Hodges. She is here for you to help you clarify or any comment or questions you may have for her.
Also, if anybody in the chat can also.
And also online, of course.
Yes.
People online can also send the questions in the chat or just open your microphone and we can hear you here. Any question? Any question about writing something that you have to write in English here, for instance? Any issues that you might experience? Or everything is clear? No? Okay, in the chat, someone else? Well, I think there are no questions.
That's fine. We can end, and then I'm happy to take individual questions if you didn't want to embarrass yourself in front of everybody and
Yeah.
ask a question. That's fine too.
Okay, thank you very much. I will just share a little bit of the, let me see. Okay, I was going to share the code for the attendance, but I cannot open it now because I am recording the session. So I will just send me an email to the coordination in the English language program, and I will register your name so that I can also send your name to the office where they will be signing these certificates. Thank you very much. So I will just appreciate Dr. Amy Hodge for this presentation today, for having been here and share all this knowledge with us. I will be providing her one of the certificates of participation for this presentation. So probably Denise? Melly, could you come here, please? You can read it for her and give it to her, please. Here. Okay, I'll give it to you and please read from here all what it says and please say.
La División de Ciencias Sociales y Humanidades, Campus Guanajuato, a través del Departamento de Lenguas, otorga la presente constancia a la doctora Amy Hodge por presentar el taller Scholarly Publishing and Editing en el marco de pláticas y talleres para desarrollo profesional de docentes en el programa de la licenciatura en la enseñanza del inglés, llevado a cabo el viernes 17 de noviembre de 2023 en el Departamento de Lenguas.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Amy. I hope that we learn more from you in another moment and that you visit the University of Guanajuato and Mexico to continue sharing this knowledge. Thank you very much.